Welcome to Unity Inspired Living. Our community began in 1989 as a small worldwide Unity book study group, and we've continued the momentum as an ever-evolving spiritual community. Each Sunday, you will find dynamic thought leaders delivering inspiring messages and talented musicians sharing sound healing through their melody. Here, we embrace ancient spiritual traditions, universal truths, and emerging wisdom. Let's check out this Sunday message. We're so grateful you've joined us.
This morning felt so deep, steeped in worship. And many years ago, I gave a talk about worship. And I remember, do you remember Ami Taubin, our musician? I remember he came up to me and he said, I've never heard anyone talk about worship like that before. And this morning, that feeling was here, with the music, with the reading. We're just really steeped. So thank you for everybody who participated in creating this space this morning, which is all of you, because we're all here. So thank you for bringing us into this very potent experience. So today's talk is the Alchemy of Acceptance. We are releasing resistance and allowing the mystery. The mystery is our lives. So many years ago, I was in a car accident, and I was thrown through the windshield. And later on, the medical team had told my family that it was very likely that I survived that accident because I had been sleeping when the accident happened. And so I was like a rag doll just through the windshield, and I essentially was fine. And had I braced for impact or tensed up, I probably, would have been in a different condition. And they said oftentimes people are so injured in accidents because that they see the car coming or they're just tense, ready. So we resist things that feel threatening, scare us, we don't expect. So if you're in the ocean and you imagine like waves, really rough waves tumbling at you, and you see one coming that's a big one, typically we'll brace for it, right? We'll tense up, we'll resist it. We'll feel like, okay, we're going to get ready for this, and then it smashes against us, and what does it do? Knocks us off balance. We feel it with the full force. But if we were to soften when we saw that wave coming, and sort of bend our knees maybe, and get ready to sort of let it carry us a little bit when it hits us, then we could sort of regain our composure more easily and maybe not take such a hit. We'll be more gently moving through the waves that are coming at us. So the theme for our year is living in the presence, the unfolding mystery. So this theme reminds us that life is not meant to be controlled, resisted, forced. We're meant to meet life with trust and presence and flow. But here's the paradox to this. We often resist the unfolding mystery because we want to be the one in the know about everything. We cling, we fight, we judge, we have opinions, we hold on to our illusion of control. So now the relationship between resistance and acceptance, and if we want to go so far to say radical acceptance, sometimes that's necessary, is interesting. That relationship is interesting because while releasing resistance often leads to acceptance, I don't feel it's a prerequisite. I don't feel that it is a prerequisite that we have to release the resistance to be accepting. So I'm going to say it this way again. While releasing resistance often leads to acceptance, it's not a prerequisite. So if we're sitting here saying, I need to release that, I'm saying, maybe not. maybe we can just accept it first. Because this is it. Releasing and acceptance, resistance and acceptance can't coexist. So here we have resistance, and here we have acceptance, an open hand. And they can't coexist. You are struggling against, and here is accepting. And so if we are mentally fighting against something, if we are staying in the state of struggle, we can't really be here in acceptance. So it's like we can't necessarily be in two places at once. We can't be in love and hate, right? Or fear and love. So it's a dance for us. But releasing resistance is not always the first step. I really felt into that with this talk. Acceptance itself is the first step to dissolving resistance. So rather than the other way around, because I think sometimes we think it has to come first. And that's the alchemy of acceptance. Bonnie's coming in. Okay, so, hi, Bonnie. Okay, so instead of feeling like we have to let go of resistance, we just recognize, I'm resisting. That's okay. I can be in the space of resisting. It's that gentle awareness that naturally softens the resistance. Jan spoke about this in her reading. I think she said acknowledging it. I'm saying having an awareness about it. So if you're just aware that, okay, I'm having this resistant feeling and I don't have to do anything with it right now except for really just say, okay, I feel it, I'm okay. In some cases, deep acceptance actually will come suddenly, like an insight, like it just washes over you. There might be just a divine intervention where it just becomes very clear without trying to release. And then other times it just has to be something that sort of dissolves out. Resistance can be a step toward acceptance. So it may seem counterproductive, sort of what I'm saying, allowing resistance to exist without fighting against it, but I feel that's part of the acceptance process. So instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, you say, I accept that I feel this way right now. I feel resistance right now. That's okay. It might feel strong. It might feel overwhelming. And then you can ask yourself some questions. Jan had some this morning. I also have. What am I afraid of if I accept this? If I accept this, so do you notice this morning we have so many opportunities? I will say that whenever we have a certain theme for the month, it shows up over and over again. And so just notice that, that's how life works. When there's something for us to have the opportunity to grow with, it will show up, because then it's just God, universe, life saying, you get to choose right now. Yeah, so I love that. I love that when that happens. So some questions. What if this situation is actually guiding me towards something greater? What is the worst thing that could happen if I accept this? Can I allow things exactly the way they are just for right now? I don't have to think about a year from now, just for right now, this moment. Can I just be here now? You don't have to force yourself to release resistance before you accept it. Instead, accept first, accept the resistance, and then often the resistance will take care of itself. That's A Course in Miracles says it just takes a little willingness, and that's just that little willingness to step into creation. And that's why there's that saying that says, just take the first step and then the staircase will appear. That's part of that, just allow. So we're going to dive into why do we resist anyway, and what happens when we resist. So resistance isn't just a spiritual challenge, it's a biological one. So the science of resistance and stress now informs us that every time we resist what is happening, what is going on in our lives, whether it's a difficult conversation, a challenging person, an emotion we don't want to feel, an unexpected change, something we did not plan for, the unexpected guest, our nervous system perceives it as a threat, and our body enters fight, flight, freeze, survival mode. Our brain releases cortisol, adrenaline, other stress hormones and chemicals, which increase our heart rate, which tighten our muscles, which suppress our digestion, which suppress our immunity. So we get sick, we get dis-ease. So over time, this chronic resistance, also known as chronic stress, leads to anxiety, high blood pressure, weakened immunity, disease, dis-ease, and many other things you could name. So Dr. Joe Dispenza, in his research, he tells us that our thoughts and emotions literally shape our biology. And if we live in resistance, constantly battling life, we wire our bodies for survival rather than creation. And we're really here to be creators. So, something important to note, resistance doesn't just affect us individually. It affects us collectively and generationally. And I think that's really important information that we now understand better. Science now proves that stress, trauma, emotional resistance are passed down genetically. This is called epigenetics. Bruce Lipton's research on gene expression confirms that we are not prisoners of our DNA. We are creators of our lives, our health, our wholeness, our reality. So when we resist, we're not just holding something for ourselves, we're carrying it forward for many in the collective. For example, something I know very clearly about, I'm very aware of piece of generational healing for my life personally, has to do with, healing for generations after me, not suppressing my voice, not suppressing my authentic expression, not abandoning myself to make other people feel comfortable. This is a very deep thread in the lineage of the women in my history, and many women, just because of the history of women. So sometimes resistance shows up as playing small, keeping the peace, maintaining status quo. So there's something to notice about resistance. We don't typically resist what we label as good, positive, or desirable, right? We tend to resist what we see as bad, wrong, painful, inconvenient, not what we planned. But what if, even in the unexpected and even in the difficult, something divinely ordered is unfolding for us? The mystery is unfolding. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but it grows in size." Why is that? Because resistance feeds the energy to the very thing that we don't want. Because think about it. You have an idea about something, you are going to buy a red car, suddenly you see all these red cars, right? It's not just philosophy, it's neuroscience. We have something called our reticular activating system, and that's the part of our brain that informs us, filters information, and it ensures that we notice what we focus on. So that's why when we get awareness about something, we start seeing it everywhere, and it's not just because it just started showing up. That's why our declarations, it'd be wise to declare what we do want, not what we don't want. So imagine trying to hold this big beach ball underwater, and you're pushing it down. The more pressure, builds as you're pushing this beach ball underneath the water. And then the moment you let go, it explodes to the surface. You can feel this, right, happening. So this is how suppressed emotions work in our psyche. The more we suppress grief, anger, disappointment, the deeper they get pushed down. They sink until they burst forth in ways we might not expect. We don't ever really know how things might bubble up to the surface, but what we do know is that it will, in some way, shape, or form. And that could be, like we talked about originally, health, interpersonal relationships, many, many ways. So resistance doesn't eliminate pain, it actually intensifies it. And when we resist, we amplify, because we're putting all that focus on, all that energy into it. And when we allow, we transform, and that's where the alchemy comes in. here's where it gets a little tricky. How we resist isn't always obvious. Resistance can be hidden in spiritual bypass. So in the spiritual community, which we are, which we love talking about high vibrations, positivity, love, and light. And these are beautiful things. I am saying nothing negative about these things. But sometimes we unintentionally turn spirituality into an avoidance, to avoid what is actually showing up, what is actually unfolding in front of us. So this is called spiritual bypassing, using spiritual ideas to suppress, escape, or deny our true emotions, truly what we're going through. And it might sound like, oh, I just need to focus on the positive. Oh, I shouldn't feel angry. That's low vibe. I'm staying away from low vibe. Everything happens for a reason, so I should just let it go, let it go, let it go. And while I'm not negating or minimizing these statements, I do think there is truth in those statements, and they can be helpful and positive. But when they're used to avoid feeling and processing, then they just become another form of resistance. Real acceptance isn't pretending that we don't see. Real acceptance is facing what is with courage and clarity. So even some of our most beloved spiritual principles can be misused. God is all there is. Misused, it can mean ignoring or stuffing feelings instead of saying everything, even pain, is part of the plan. So another one is we create through our thought. Fair. Misused, it could become self-blame. I attracted this. What's wrong with me? Why did I get this, bag of lemons? So instead, we create through thought invites us into conscious co-creation with all of the experiences, however they look, not by pretending it isn't there or putting on rose-colored lenses, just really looking at it with clarity and compassion. So another one, our thoughts have power. Yes, true. Misused, it can lead to repression, like, I can't have any bad thoughts. I'm negative if I have bad thoughts. So let me just not have these thoughts. Now we're naming them bad too, right? Instead, we can realize that transformation happens through the dark, not by pretending the dark isn't there. So Tony Robbins once made a comment many years ago, and I always loved it. He said, you can be standing in a field of weeds and shouting, there are no weeds, there are no weeds, while they're strangling your ankles, but there's nothing going to change about the weeds if you don't look at them and pull them out or put a weed killer on them or something. You have to deal with the weeds. So this is sort of what I'm talking about. This is the difference between resisting pain and alchemizing it into wisdom. So recently, I had an experience, someone I really trusted let me down, and it really hurt. And my first reaction, to be honest, was a disappointment, deep disappointment, a bit of frustration. Maybe you've been here, perhaps thinking, I shouldn't feel this way. I know better. I can rise above this. If such a situation arises for you, shoulding on yourself is always a good indicator that it's resistance in disguise. Yeah, that's what we're going to call it, resistance in disguise, a little mask on it. That's bypassing instead of healing. That's a bypass. So instead of forcing myself in a situation to high vibes only, rose-colored lenses and looking the other way, I sat with it. I just let myself feel the disappointment. I asked myself, what is this feeling here to teach me? What else is beneath this reaction? What is being activated in me? Where is the lesson? Is this the remnants of some old wound that is really ready to be released for good right now? Why is this showing up? I get to decide. I call these types of questions questions that propel. They propel us forward. Staying in curiosity allows the mystery to unfold. We can block it with resistance. So this situation that I was experiencing wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about my expectations, my boundaries, my need for clarity. And little sidebar here, not little sidebar, big sidebar, it's never about them. It's never about the other. It's always an inside job. Always. Now, if we're talking about intimate, interpersonal relationship partnerships, there are definitely shared pieces of co-regulation and cooperation that are vital. So I'm not negating that, but I'm not talking about that necessarily. But in the scheme of things, it's always an inside job. That's what I'm trying to say. We want to say, what did they do? So also, if you have a deep longing to evolve, if you have this fire, this in your soul, there's a mission in your soul, in your life, which is, I'm going to say all of us, then your most repeated pattern is there for you to extract the lesson, to unravel it, to comprehend it for deep, eternal change. So that's why patterns are so important to notice and be aware of and not bypass. That's why I'm talking about that. So the moment I stopped resisting and embraced what was, expressed gratitude, because gratitude changes everything, expressed gratitude for this very unique opportunity for my soul's evolution, because that's exactly what it was, something shifted. It always shifts in that moment. That situation no longer had any power over me. In fact, I was saying something like, I have my power back. I feel that my life force is here. It's mine. My vitality is not drained. I'm not jaded. I'm not going to let this situation jade me or skew me in any way. So looking at alchemy, scientifically, alchemy is turning base metals into gold. Spiritually, alchemy is turning pain into wisdom, fear into freedom, resentment into forgiveness, resistance into flow, and you can fill in many more. Alan Watts taught, don't force life. You flow with the pattern of things as they already exist. So when you're cutting the wood, you don't cut against the grain, you cut with it. The same applies to life. We suffer when we force, manipulate, try to stick the round peg into the square. We flow when we accept. That's why we talk about we feel in the flow. We feel in alignment when we're in acceptance. Living in the presence, our theme for the year, is trusting life, trusting God's plan, trusting the universe. Acceptance does not mean allowing abusive situations or remaining where you're not valued or respected. Acceptance is not passive. It's an active choice. It's actually a very active choice to, first, become aware, see what is, then feel what arises, because we're not going to push the ball down, suppress, and then we get to choose conscious action. So that is what it means to embody wholeness. We talk about a lot about embodiment. That's what this means. It means we're taking the fullness of life, and we're not avoiding the dark. We're illuminating it. To heal, we must integrate our shadow, not exile it, which a lot of times people want to do, because it's usually not the pleasant point that we want to focus on. So I know firsthand about this because when my husband was killed 1.5 years ago in an accident, I could have used spiritual platitudes. He's in a better place. This is just part of a divine plan. But that wouldn't have been acceptance for me at that time. That would have been bypassing my deep grief. Real acceptance wasn't saying it was okay. I never said it was okay. Real acceptance was walking through the dark valley, coming out of the storm with deeper wisdom than I ever imagined was possible. I did not accept his death by calling it good. I accepted it by allowing my world to unravel. Accepted it by allowing the darkness. Not just allowing the darkness, but walking into it. And in doing so, that loss carved out a space inside of me for something new to be born that I didn't even know existed. And so, the interesting thing is that sometimes the tears now aren't necessarily grief. It's a mix of joy. There's so many things. Because there's so much about my life that is so different now and so new. And had I not walked this experience, I wouldn't be here. I'm still not calling it good or okay necessarily. You know, my daughter's pregnant. I watched a video the other day of a dad in the delivery room. Well, you know, and it was really cute. And I thought, there's loss. So I don't mean to ever say that that's not felt, the absence. But when we truly release resistance and move into acceptance, something new is born. Something shifts. I integrated the sorrow, the shock, the sheer agonizing silence into something meaningful. The upset, the discomfort, the pain was the solvent. It was the elixir for my momentum forward into a new beginning. That's alchemy. That's the alchemy of acceptance. So there's a science of transformation, rewiring resistance into flow. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, I talk about him a lot because I love him. I think he's great. And Bruce Lipton. And there are many others who have shown that we are literally wired for change. Like, our human capacity is so great. Like, we're amazing. Our brains have neuroplasticity, meaning that we can rewire our responses. This is why we are so resilient. All of you could tell me stories about your lives and the things you've been through that you thought you were not going to get through, and yet you are here and thriving. Yeah, it's incredible. So when we stop resisting and start embracing, we shift from this survival mode, the fight, flight, freeze, into a state of coherence, where our brain, our heart, our body align in the present moment. And that makes it possible for us to live in the presence and allow the unfolding mystery. I know HeartMath does a lot of work with this coherence. There's a lot of modalities that that work with all of that. And here's the magic. So instead of fighting what is, we flow. Instead of tensing up, bracing, we trust. Instead of resisting life, we live fully. We enter in to the unfolding mystery. So if we view through a lens that all relationships are forms of cooperation, even our struggles, even our fears, our grief, cooperate with the unfolding mystery, something different appears for us. When we know that to be true, when we don't impose our manipulation, our ideas onto life, and we listen and we surrender and we align, we can co-create. I think it's Abraham Hicks says, we operate in the vortex, this high, what do they call it, high-flying disc. We're in a state of divine ease, and then life moves through us. Think of the wave when we're bending and softening versus hitting us with full force. So there's a story that most of us know, but I think it's well worth repeating. It's about the farmer. So once in a small village, there lived a wise old farmer, and he had a horse, one horse that helped him plow his fields. And then one day the horse ran away to the hills, and the villagers came and they said, "Oh, what a terrible misfortune." And the farmer shrugged and said, maybe, maybe not. A few days later, the horse returned with a bunch of horses. So now the farmer had a bunch of horses, and the villagers cheered. "How wonderful, you're so lucky." And the farmer just smiled, maybe, maybe not. And soon after that, his son, the farmer's son, tried to tame one of the wild horses, and he got thrown off and broke his leg, and the villagers gasped, "Oh, how terrible. That's so sad that your son can't help you with the plowing now." And the farmer said, maybe, maybe not. Then a week later, the soldiers came along, and they were looking to draft the young men to war. And because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he wasn't able to go. And the villagers said, "Oh, how fortunate. Your son was spared. That's wonderful." And the farmer said, maybe, maybe not. So life unfolds in ways that we may not expect in the moment, but what seems like a setback might just be a setup. What seems like a breakdown might be a breakthrough around the corner. And so if we stay out of the temptation to judge, call it bad or wrong, or that's not what I wanted, or you shouldn't have done that, we can begin to create a space for a greater blessing to show up. Something different, something we didn't even plan for. So when Jennifer read the talk title, I forgot. So I give the talk titles to Kathy months in advance, or I try to months in advance. So I wrote that, and what I was thinking when I wrote, how do we welcome the unexpected guest? I had forgotten that I had written that. But what I was thinking of when I wrote that was when I was a child, we lived in a town where I lived in Southern California. We had a lot of men that would cross the border to work, do yard work, and other physical labor to help, and you would just pick them up at the store, and then you bring them into the house, and they do yard work and things for you. And my mom, we had gone and picked up a couple of the men, and they were doing yard work for our house that day. And they usually slept up in the trail. We had like a trail and some like little encampment by our house. So they weren't showering. They didn't have clean clothes. So there was sometimes a smell. But my mother taught me, when I think about it, I cry with tears of joy because she taught me the greatest gift of life. And it's immeasurable. That love, unconditional love, acceptance, grace, not resisting the thing that most people might resist. She invited them into her house to cook for them. This happened frequently. And my sister and I, we were very small, but I remember we'd stand on the hall, and they were full of their packs and hadn't showered in heaven knows how long. but welcoming them in to our home, to our table, to our kitchen, cooking for them, no resistance. The point of that story is we didn't expect them, but my mother welcomed them with zero resistance and complete acceptance. And there's something in that energy that is unforgettable. And so when we remember to operate like that, with everything that shows up, everybody, every situation, so this doesn't often happen, but there's a lot that's moving through the room today. So this might be the first time this happened during one of my talks. I'm not sure. I think it is. So there's just something that there's a lot that I'm being called right now to move through for this room. And what I'm going to share about this is that sometimes, we're talking about emotions today a little bit. Sometimes when we are open and we begin to really live in this space of not resisting, we become open to a lot more than maybe we realize. And so that's part of being empathy and saying, God, use me. And that's something I say every single day. God, use me, however that looks. And so sometimes it looks strange. So I'm just going to ask everyone to take a really deep breath right now, just to help some movement, and exhale. So resisting happens when we judge something as good or bad, and it only brings unnecessary suffering when we decide something is bad and that's not what we want. So when we trust in the unfolding of life, we open ourselves up to possibilities beyond our limited view. And I know we talk about that a lot, so I feel like that's just sort of landing as a platitude. But the essence of that is so enormous. When we see that, when we make space for something bigger, it's pretty deep. It's pretty deep. So thank you, everybody, for being in this space right now and also releasing, because that's what's happening today. Yeah, I didn't expect that. But there's a lot of release happening. So everybody here, just drink a lot of water today. Allow your muscles to relax today. I ask you, what are you resisting in your life? Is it a relationship? Is it an emotion you don't want to feel? Is it an unexpected change you did not ask for? What in your life have you actually been pushing down the beach ball you're trying to keep underwater? And what would happen if just for today you let go of resistance and just leaned into that unfolding mystery? What if you just embraced it instead of resisted it? If you stopped fighting the tide and just learned to surf? So today we can commit not to avoidance, not to spiritual bypass, but to true alchemy. The alchemy of seeing life as it is, noticing where resistance is showing up, the alchemy of feeling the experience fully in order to transmute it, the alchemy of transforming resistance into freedom. The unfolding mystery is not something for us to fight, it's something for us to trust. Knowing that the universe is conspiring on your behalf, knowing that God has a plan, understanding the interconnectedness and the cooperation of all experiences, owning the power of your inner guidance and your intuition. We can let go, we can breathe, and we can embrace the journey, not just focus on the destination, as we step into the role of alchemists of our own lives. Thank you today for releasing so much resistance in this room. I am so grateful. Blessings shine on beautiful beings.